guy coming out of Northern Virginia with all these crazy ideas that want to go off and be governor. You know, one of the Elliott family, who even stuck with me after we started the first venture capital fund in Southwest Virginia that didn't do too well. The Daltons, who I had to prove time and again that I was a slightly different kind of Democrat. And nobody more than Sonny Merriman. And Sonny and Pat and Lee, the fact that your dad and grandfather would take me, and you know, those calls, I got the same kind of Sonny Merriman calls.
Talk about me?
You met, well, he would always mention, there was nothing ever linear about a Sonny Merriman call. It would go here and there and here. And, you know, it's one thing to say, okay, I'm going to help somebody in politics, and never sure which political party Sonny belonged to, other than the most successful party. Whatever is good for Virginia was what Sonny was in favor of. But Sonny did, you know, it's one thing to say, I'm going to back somebody for office, like to your employees, your community. But the one of the things that Sonny loved the most, don't worry, we'll pick up all this paper in a minute, was Virginia Tech. And the fact that Sonny would let me come in, we remember when you were very little, and come into his tailgate party and introduce me around was the greatest seal of approval I could ever receive. Now, you know, for many people in Virginia, I was very proud of my tenure as governor. We got named Best Managed State, we got named Best State for Business, we got named Best State for Public Education, from preschool to graduate school. But I can say, I think without a doubt, and we all miss Sonny still, that the one thing that Sonny Merriman felt proudest about me and taking an investment in me was I was the guy that got the Hokies into the ACC. And he would introduce me and say, this is maybe the only usually blankety-blank Democrat we ever need to help, but just remember how the Hokies got into the ACC. You know, we can excuse him any other sin. But, and that, you know, that was a sausage-making story, too. Let me take one other point of personal privilege before we talk about what we're here for. And that is to say, said hello to a number of school superintendents, a number of school board members. I think you even started on school board at one point in Lynchburg. There are hard jobs in public service. Matt knows it's hard to be a delegate, hard to be a secretary, hard to be a senator, hard to be a mayor. But I don't think in my close to 30 years being around politics in Virginia that there is more, any job in any form of public service that has been harder or more thankless over the last 16 to 18 months now than being a school board member or a superintendent. No matter what you decided dealing with COVID, chances are you're going to make close to half the people mad. And I just want to say, as a proud Virginian, and somebody who's been around this for a long time, I thank anybody who's involved in making public education better in this Commonwealth. I thank you for your service. I thank you for making the really, really hard choices that we've all had to make as we have to have gone through what is obviously a completely unprecedented scourge of this virus. So thank you and God bless you. And no matter what you believe or who you support in politics, if you believe, you know, in these people who are doing this, Lord knows it's not for the money, this kind of service. Please, I implore you, go out and get vaccinated. Make sure our communities are vaccinated. We need to have COVID in the darn rearview mirror. And when we see in a state like Florida now, 1,300, 1,400 people die yesterday, many of them very, very young. It doesn't have to be this way. And you look at the FDA approval. I know that's not what we're talking about today, but if you really believe in your school board members, again, I don't care what their political persuasion, I don't care what the views are. Let's get past this. We owe it to each other. Yeah, you got a personal freedom. That personal freedom does not mean you ought to be putting other people's lives in jeopardy. So thank you for your service. Let me, I'm going to take 3 or 4 minutes now, and then I'm going to take some questions. I promise not a long, and then actually, you should probably, don't do this. I'll talk shorter if you turn off the fan, because it's actually kind of cool here as opposed to everybody else back there. But if you people talked about the bipartisan infrastructure plan. It's $1.2 trillion. It's literally about $540 billion of net new money over 5 years. And I had some other Senator Floyd come up to me, and he was a Democrat, and he came up and said, Warner, oh gosh, bipartisan or infrastructure plan, that's not that hard. That's roads and bridges and broadband and stuff. And I said, then why in the heck hasn't any president for the last 50 years done this? Don't think it was hard? I realized today I wore the shirt that when we passed 2 weeks ago. See, it's all ripped. It was a really hard fight to get this thing passed, the 69 votes in the Senate. But it is a record kind of investment, because the truth is, if you look at our country, I've talked with Doug and Bev so many times about roads and everything. America was the leading nation in infrastructure post-World War II. Literally starting about the 80s and early 90s, we started cutting back on our investment in infrastructure. We cut our investment in infrastructure in half over the last 35 years as a percent of our whole GDP. That's crazy. Again, I don't care whether you're Democrat, Republican, Libertarian, Independent, Vegetarian. That is not a good business plan for our country. And for 50 years, presidents of both parties, Congresses have talked about it and not done squat. Is this plan perfect? No. It is not perfect. I've never signed as a governor or voted for a bill as a senator that's a perfect bill. But will this put 25 million plus Americans back to work? Will this improve the efficiency of our economy in ways that have been unprecedented? Absolutely. Will we put $110 billion into roads and bridges in Virginia, where we've got 700 bridges that are deficient? Will we put $65 billion into broadband so that every Virginian can get not only broadband, but at a high speed and an affordable rate? Will we finally realize, and for anybody that doesn't still believe that our climate is changing, I would point to the hurricanes or the flooding in Tennessee or the level of hot weather we've had. This is a fact. We're going to put $47 billion into resiliency to try to protect against some of those changes. We're going to make sure as well, $25 billion in airports. We were, Mayor Dolan and others a little bit while earlier at the train station. $66 billion for rail. We're going to have at least 2 trains from Lynchburg up. And we're going to go all the way to Christiansburg. That's as far as that was the Sonny Merriman Memorial route to Montgomery County. But my hope is we can find enough to get down to Bristol. It hits category after category that is of need, and I'm forgetting a bunch. One of the most important is why we're here. As Floyd said, we are changing mobility in this country. And the future of mobility is going to be either electric or low-carbon vehicles. It is coming. That's why I thank our friends from Dominion, also thank the legislature match for back on broadband, giving them the ability to build that middle mile, something really important. But if we don't make investments, we're not going to be able to compete. So this bill does have $5 billion for supporting an electric bus and low energy bus, low carbon bus infrastructure. That is critically important. It's got $2.5 billion, actually we wanted a little more, on electric vehicle charging stations. Charging stations are going to be the gas stations of the future. And we've got to build them here. And there is no part of our fleet that is a better place to start this transformation than school buses. Talking to Floyd, the gentleman, one of your deputies over here about the battery life. Yeah, and the travel range. Buses 70 to 100 miles. Nothing is better than a school bus route because you do it on a repeated basis. You've got kind of a bookends on how far you're going to go. And if there was ever a time to make that transition, it's right now. So, the fact is, what they were saying, at least in Washington, and boy, you can tell me if I'm wrong, but the projections are we're going to buy 25,000 new school buses over the next 5 years in this country. If we don't make these investments, even with what's going on down in North Carolina with this plant, 90% of those buses will be made in China. That is not a good deal for America. That is not a good deal in terms of national security. It's not a good deal to make sure that we continue to lead in next energy development. So I am really proud to be here with my dear friends from sunny Maryland and others from around Central Virginia. This bill got 69 votes in the U.S. Senate. You can't, as I said this earlier, you can't get 69 senators normally to agree. The sun comes up in the east. This was a freaking big deal. Now we've got, I hope it gets through the House as quickly as possible so that we can get it to the President's desk signed and start implementing these changes to keep Virginia competitive and to make sure we make that switch on mobility. Thank you all for being here. I appreciate it very much. I know I'm taking a couple of questions now. Is that right? All right. You want community questions or you want press questions? What was who's in charge?
You're in charge.
I'm in charge? Okay. We'll take a community question. Well, actually, maybe we'll take a press question or two first. Okay, well, anybody? Yes. All right, I'm at that tipping point of where my family, everybody says, and my staff says, it's hearing aid time, so you gotta speak up a little bit.
You sort of already addressed this, but I just wanted to hear maybe some more from you about the totality, so to speak, of investment in electric vehicles in Virginia. I know there's school buses, but when does that investment maybe affect more things like electric cars?
Right, great question. One of the things that the president wanted to do was put a ton of money into incentives around electric cars. And that was a subject, candidly, that we couldn't get total agreement with some of our Republican friends. So we said, well, let's at least do the charging stations. Let's get the infrastructure. And frankly, the federal government doesn't need to fund the whole thing. If you put, I'm a business guy, you put 10 cents in equity, and then you can, one of the things we're also working on is a long-term infrastructure bank at, record low interest rates. And then we could take out debt because these charging stations are going to have a revenue stream that can come out of them. So we got to do the charging stations. And what I think you'll see, if we move to this second part of the president's plan, which is, again, candidly more controversial, we will take on a whole lot of things around the environment in terms of potentially a clean energy standard, a fee on methane, additional investments for solar and wind. But part of those investments will include as well some level of a tax credit for purchase of electric vehicles. Now again, I want to make sure that's purchase incentives for folks that are kind of lower price cars. I'm not looking for a tax credit for somebody that's buying a $100,000 car, but that will definitely be part of the next phase. Because again, this makes climate sense, it makes national security sense, and it makes economic sense. These cars are going to, and buses are going to be produced someplace. I want them to be produced in America.
Senator, could you speak about the improved technology for those who still doubt electric buses and even electric cars?
For those who still doubt on electric vehicles or electric cars or in this new technology stuff, I got a short two-word answer. Elon Musk. This guy, both in science, in space, and on electric vehicles, took an idea where, frankly, Detroit was a little slow. And now, I don't know, is he second or third wealthiest man in the world? America's always been about innovation. I don't think there is anyone, even some of my folks that I work with from hardcore oil-producing states, realize we've got to change. And the challenge, quite honestly, is too much of that R&D is going on in China. Not going on in America, not even going on in Europe. China's still doing some things to pollute, but China owns, 80% of the solar panel market at this point? millions of jobs created. I want to commend Dominion again. We are trying, and we've got a big wind energy conference coming up on Thursday in Richmond, Wednesday and Thursday in Richmond. We're going to have the biggest offshore wind on the East Coast. Our goal is to make sure that we make those turbines and those blades in America and Virginia. Where most of them are made now? China. So, and when I say China, my beef is with the Communist Party of China and Xi Jinping. It's not with the Chinese people or Chinese Americans. But there is never, I'd love to tell you more, but sitting on the Intelligence Committee, there is no greater threat to our national security by a many-fold factor, regardless of what's going on in Afghanistan or Russia or elsewhere, than the threat posed by China. And they, in area after area around innovation, are our equal, or in some places, passing us. And we as a country need to step up. Anyone else? Local community can, ask questions too. I don't often get to Campbell, so you could ask like a school board question, or I could blame it on Matt or something if there's not enough local funding. Anybody got anything you want to say? Tim, right? Now let the record show to the press that this, Tim, I didn't ask you to ask that question, did I? We did not pre-talk about this, did we? So this is an honest, straightforward, from the crowd question. Tim, I'm glad you asked me that question. Because if there is a single area where we have been least invested, and we put the whole burden on the localities, it's water and sewer. And one of the things that, in Central Virginia we're pretty good, but we got parts of Southwest Virginia where people still don't have access to clean drinking water on a daily basis. Not just wells, you have to go down sometimes, live up in the hollers and pick it up and truck it up in vats. So this legislation puts $55 billion into water, sewer, and clean drinking water. It will provide a level of support for localities. Oftentimes we do this with revolving water funds, and they are just stretched too thin because it's too easy to sometimes ignore what's, those lead pipes and those systems that are not doing what they should. And we don't want to have the circumstance, if people realized how many communities across America and across Virginia are one bad incident away or two incidents away from what happened in Flint, Michigan, where people couldn't drink their water for a year and a half. Thank you for your question. Thank you for your service on that board. It's, when you say to people you're the sewage guy, it doesn't necessarily, people sometimes think I'm in the sewage business too. Last rounds, come on. I know it's hot. This is like, let me just say for the record, this is the first time I've ever been in a forum. Somebody else want it? Yes, ma'am. Dr. Carter. I was going to say this is the first time I've ever been in a forum that Doug Dalton didn't ask me a pointed question. So go ahead.
For your disclaimer at the beginning of your speech regarding the school board members and also the superintendents, we have just been slaughtered lately by just different distractions, and we're really trying to focus on students, their recovery and their social emotional well-being, trying to get them back in school 5 days a week. And so thank you for that.
Well, thank you, Dr. Carter. I think I've been doing this long enough to realize I'll make one comment, and that'll be the last question or comment. Doug, sorry. But, this has been an unprecedented time. Never in my lifetime did I think we would be hit with such a virus that we had to close down our whole economy. And, I actually think history will treat the last year of the Trump administration and the Congress and the first part of the Biden administration, we didn't do it perfect. But we put literally close to $5 trillion into the economy. Some areas it was excessive. But if we hadn't done that to support the PPP program for small business or the Restaurants Act, or the $4.3 billion we sent to the Commonwealth, or the $3 billion we sent to local governments, or the $2 billion to school systems, we would be so much further behind the ball right now. And one of the things I'm committed to do is making sure that some of those maybe appropriate restrictions that were put on those funds, we give you more flexibility. You ought to have more freedom to spend that what makes sense in your local community rather than dictated out of Washington, or for that matter out of Richmond. But I'll close with what I started at, is, you know, there are countries in the world that aren't near as great as ours, that are much further along, even with the Delta variant, than we are, because they've not turned getting a vaccine and wearing a mask when you're inside into a political football. We are a better country than this. You know, if you didn't get a polio vaccine, could you imagine when polio rampaged this country and suddenly people were saying, we're not going to get vaccinated? I mentioned the fact earlier, I wanted to check my fact. You know, what killed more soldiers in the Revolutionary War than the British? The smallpox. And Washington required revolutionary soldiers to get at least inoculated. They didn't have a full vaccine. Our country has confronted these kind of viruses and illnesses in the past, and we've always been driven by what science says. And my appeal to you is, you know, this vaccine has gone in more arms of more people in this country and around the world than any vaccine in our history. If there are going to be awful things coming out, we would know by now. The FDA is on the level. They have given formal, full approval on Pfizer. So, yeah, you got your personal rights, but I also think we have collective rights that say, you know, if an employer then says, we're not going to keep you employed unless you get vaccinated, or the military says, you know, we're going to make sure everybody stays vaccinated. It is about the safety of your troops. You cannot be a standout alone when you're serving in a platoon. So I implore you, let's put the politics behind us. Let's do what's good for our health care. Let's do what's good for our kids. Get this behind us. Greater days ahead for Virginia and America, driven by the Sonny Merriman Bus Company.
Thank you, Senator. Okay. We'd like to invite you to take a short spin on the electric bus on Julie in air conditioning. So please jump aboard. I think a few other people are going to join you on the ride, just a quick ride. For the rest of you, we're going to be serving lunches. In the back, we've got plenty of cold beverages and some box lunches. So feel free to take one and go.